Alrighty, it is 4 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. First, I just want to take a moment to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Marissa Mazer. I'm a graduate assistant for NIU Student Wellness, which is a part of Counseling and Consultation Services. I'm also here with my co-presenter, Julie Rubel, and today we will be presenting to you guys our self-care webinar series, Coping Through COVID-19. Please mute yourself during this presentation, but of course, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, comment in the chat box, or temporarily unmute yourselves. We're more than happy to answer your questions throughout this presentation. Alrighty, so today in our second webinar of our self-care webinar series, we will be covering stress management. So what is stress? What does it look like? How does it present itself? Kind of relating this all to COVID as well. And just discussing different management strategies to help you cope with that. So you may have heard us say that we're part of NIU Student Wellness. So really, what is wellness? Stress can definitely affect your wellness. Wellness is a conscious, self-directed, dynamic process of trying to achieve your potential. It's more than the absence of disease, but an active process that interacts with one another. So as you can see, we have 7 different dimensions of wellness, which is physical, occupational, intellectual, environmental, emotional, social, and spiritual. All of these dimensions of wellness comprise your optimal wellness. And when we engage in each dimension, it will help us to be well. And let's face it, when you are well, you do well. If you're not feeling well, you may not be able to be there completely throughout the day, may not be able to academically perform as well as you'd like to. So that's why wellness is just so important, because it allows you to be your best self going throughout the day. And this presentation will touch upon your physical, emotional, social, and spiritual wellness. So let's dive in. So I'll kind of ask everyone here, this is a little bit of a discussion here. So what is it like to be a college student? Or perhaps you're a faculty member joining us. You know, what's it like during this time being on a college campus, excuse me, or if you are a student, what is it like? So feel free to unmute yourself, or if you prefer just typing in the chat box, that's completely okay too. And maybe it is that you still have no idea what you're doing, just like this picture shows, and that is completely okay too. All right, so we got Logan, stressful for sure. Andrea, lots of stress. Crystal, overwhelming. Yes, completely. And all these things right now, a lot of people are experiencing. So please know that you're not alone during this time. And especially with this time, the coronavirus pandemic, it can even add that extra layer of stress. So let me check the chat box here. We also have, sometimes I feel pressure being a student. Yes, there's a lot on our hands right now. Not only are we balancing this whole virtual world, but trying to attend class virtually. There's lots of tech stress that comes with that, and just adapting to these new changes, it can certainly be a lot. Yes, pressure of having your life completely figured out at a young age. That is heavy. And that's something that we oftentimes have to navigate throughout our college experience. So thank you all for the participation in this. So just putting it into perspective, this is kind of how people generally think it is to be a college student. Good grades, enough sleep, social life. Oftentimes we're having to pick only 2 of those. So if we're trying to get good grades and get enough sleep, oftentimes we're going to be sacrificing our social life because of that. And we're really trying to balance a lot. But this is how it really is. We're balancing so much more. Friends, class, work, family, homework, hobbies, food, maybe even extracurricular activities, resume builders, perhaps you're volunteering. And as you can see, attempting to do everything until stress takes over, you may end up, feeling emotionally overwhelmed, not wanting to do any of it. Maybe just wanting to sit in bed and watch Netflix all day to escape to somewhere else. I know I am certainly guilty of that, and a lot of people are guilty of that as well. But that's not always a bad thing to take some time for yourself, but certainly can definitely be overwhelming having to balance all these things. And as I mentioned earlier, with this being a pandemic that we're living in, that certainly adds an extra layer, something else we're having to balance and navigate and work through. So we do want to recognize that we understand that it is a very stressful time right now, and hopefully this presentation can allow us to just start having these conversations and strategize what is the best way to help manage the stress we're encountering in this current time. So what is stress? We're going to dive into positive and negative stress. So oftentimes, and maybe right now, you guys may be experiencing distress, which is negative stress that can have a detrimental effect on health. So this can definitely be, trying to navigate school, trying to figure out how to work all the different features on your laptop, or figuring out, when do we need to go to the grocery store, or, just those day-to-day things. It can definitely have a detrimental effect on your health. You may be experiencing physical, cognitive, emotional, behavioral symptoms because of this. On the other hand, there's also eustress, which is positive stress that presents opportunities for new growth. So this could potentially be landing a new job. Although that search process and interview process may be stressful, it leads to an opportunity for new growth, that new job. So although when we think about stress, we may be thinking about distress more times than not, at least that's what it's like for me. You may also experience eustress, so anything that will lead to a positive outcome. So now we're going to dive into recognizing stress. What does it look like? What are the different symptoms? So this is a pretty exhaustive list. You may or may not experience these things. Everyone reacts differently to stress. But you may experience some headaches or migraines, perhaps even feeling a little dizzy, really just kind of out of it in your head. Also skin blemishes. You may have oily skin, you may break out perhaps, tightness in chest and hyperventilation. So just like maybe having some troubles breathing, or just having like a steady breathing pace. Heart pounding, increased blood pressure, or heart rate. So if you ever think about when you're in the moment, you're really stressed about something. I know for me personally, I'll feel my heart kind of pounding out of its chest. So that's definitely a physical symptom as well. Weight changes, so you may be gaining weight, you may be losing weight. Stomach ache and nausea, so really just not feeling well, feeling like you might throw up or just have a really upset stomach. Back and neck pain, so you may feel fatigued, you may feel sore, you may just feel, not as comfortable as you once were because of the stress. And sweaty hands, that is another physical symptom of stress as well. Now we have some emotional symptoms. So depression, feeling very sad, more times than not. Also anxiety, very overwhelmed, anxious, that you may even experience some physical symptoms while you are having some anxiety as well, like the hyperventilation, tightness in chest and such. Suicide or suicidal thoughts. So stress can certainly be very, very overwhelming for, oh, excuse me, let me go back. May be very overwhelming for someone. So it may lead to having some suicidal thoughts. So please know that the NIU campus does have a counseling and consultation center, more than willing to help anyone, and as well as our community counseling training center, and we'll provide those resources at the end, as well as insomnia, not being able to fall asleep or even stay asleep, irritability, perhaps some anger, maybe you're on a little bit of a short fuse, feeling helpless and feeling overwhelmed. These are all going to be some of the emotional symptoms that you may or may not experience. So everyone reacts differently to stress. Now, this brings me to our cognitive symptoms. You may have trouble thinking clearly. So perhaps think about a time where you were stressed. I know for me, sometimes I'll get stressed if I have a big paper due. I know for me, that's not the right mindset for me to start working on that paper because I am not able to think clearly. I have racing thoughts, which leads me to have difficulty concentrating. So perhaps that's not the best mindset to be completing my assignment in, but I know that that's a cognitive response to the stress that I'm experiencing. You may also experience forgetfulness, have a lack of creativity. Maybe you're really into making crafts or painting, but you're just so stressed, it's just, you're not feeling it today. Lack of humor, indecisiveness, having trouble making decisions. Maybe you're a little bit self-critical of yourself, not practicing that self-compassion. And lastly, pessimistic, just kind of having a negative outlook, not really happy or looking forward to anything throughout the day. And lastly, we have our behavioral symptoms. This includes procrastination, so waiting till the last minute to complete things, sleeping too much or too little. So you may not be getting enough sleep, which could lead to increased stress as well, or you may be sleeping too much, which will leave you feeling pretty groggy and disoriented throughout the day. As well as eating too much or too little. Maybe you find comfort in eating, maybe you find comfort in food. So that's kind of a coping mechanism for you. So you may be eating too much, or perhaps it's the opposite, you're not eating enough. So just some things to consider. Substance use, perhaps. Fidgety, nail biting, as well as teeth grinding, and short-tempered. So the reason we go through all these different symptoms is really just to bring awareness that if you are experiencing some of these symptoms, whether it be physical, emotional, cognitive, or behaviorally, it may be your body's response to stress. So just kind of think about that. Think about how maybe you react to stress, because if you're more aware of your reaction or the symptoms you experience, then you could recognize it and be able to strategize, okay, what's the best healthy way for me to cope with it. Speaking of stress management strategies, this next part of the presentation will go into different kinds of strategies you all can take or make to help combat the stress that we sometimes feel. So the first one is going to be take physical action. So moving more, moving around a little bit more, getting the blood flowing and all that good stuff. We'll dive into each one individually. Then we have create an efficient workspace. So really just putting yourself in that environment that makes you work most effectively. Building support networks. This one is super important because having those support networks can really buffer the effects of stress. When you know you have people around you supporting you, it's definitely helpful when you're going through a pretty overwhelming or anxious time. Regulating your emotional response. So, trying not to jump from 0 to 100 so quickly. And this could be many different emotional responses. Maybe it's anger, trying not to let your anger take control, or your worries, stuff like that. And lastly, try relaxation techniques. So we'll go into mindfulness, meditation, just different things to provide maybe some ideas or inspire you guys to try new things to help with the stress that you may feel. So the first stress management strategy is taking physical action. So what we really like to emphasize for this part of the presentation is eat, sleep, move. So we'll start with eat better. My dining feature is on the NIU dining webpage, and it also has healthy husky food options. So we love to mention this resource to everyone because you can actually go to the dining part of the NIU website, and they have the My Dining feature. From there, you're able to see what each residence hall is offering for food for the day. And from there, you're able to kind of think beforehand, okay, what am I going to eat today? And there's many options to customize. So they have healthy husky food options, so letting you know what is essentially a healthy food to eat. But you can also personalize it to yourself. Perhaps you're vegan, you're a vegetarian, you have a nut allergy, you're gluten-free, all those kinds of things you can apply. And that'll help you to navigate, okay, this is what I'm going to eat, this is what I'm going to stick to, and then so you won't be tempted by other, perhaps not as healthy options while you're there. Also, eating a balanced meal with My Paw. That's going to be that graphic on your bottom right screen, essentially just to show you guys a visual of what should be included on your plate. As you can see, we've got dairy, grains, fruits, vegetables, and even protein. But as you can see, the biggest portion is going to be those vegetables, because when you're eating well, you'll feel better. You won't feel so heavy and, kind of down for the rest of the day. You'll be able to academically perform better. And so, kind of just ask yourself, maybe you're not feeling well, maybe you're really stressed. Maybe incorporating just a nice balanced meal can help you to give you that energy or that boost that you may need. All right, you can meet with a nutrition coach here at NIU. So definitely connecting with them through our recreation center. You can do this individually, or you can do, they have like a buddy program, so you could do it with a friend. And essentially what you would do is you would meet with a nutrition coach one-on-one. They are offering this virtually. And just discuss kind of your goals, what you're hoping to do, like what are your eating better goals, and they will help you to reach them. They'll kind of strategize with you different things you can do throughout the week, healthy snacks you can make, and really just help you reach those goals. So it's a great resource as well. But of course, you can learn more about eating healthy through NAU Campus Dining Services, Nutrition and Wellness page, or check out their social media as well. All right, so we've got eat. Now we're going to dive into sleep, sleeping better. So it is recommended that you sleep about 7 to 9 hours per night. You may or may not be hitting that range each night, and it definitely is something you have to work towards and plan ahead for. But that is the recommendation, and that is because it allows your brain to go through the REM sleep cycle so you feel recharged and ready to go for the next day. For naps, napping, some people engage in it, some people don't. For me, it's very beneficial, especially if I maybe didn't get my 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. But it is recommended that you keep naps about 20 to 30 minutes. I know for some, that may seem like a very short amount of time. And that is because you actually don't want your brain to go through that REM cycle, because if you wake up during the REM cycle, then you'll actually feel very groggy, very disoriented. So if you've ever taken a really long, like 2-3 hour nap and you woke up feeling even more tired, that's exactly why. So sleeping, one of the best ways to eliminate stress. You know, if we're getting that adequate number of hours of sleep per night, we're recharged, our brain is ready to go, we'll be able to concentrate, focus, think better, and academically perform better. So here's just some tips to kind of help with that. So establish a bedtime routine. If you know that you have to get up at, let's say, 6 a.m., for example, then making sure that you're in bed no later than 10 so you can get that 8 hours right in the middle of that 7 to 9. So kind of thinking ahead and trying to establish that bedtime routine, because over time that routine will become natural for you. Determine your ideal sleep environment. Maybe you are a person that likes to have the TV on, or maybe you do not like to have any noise at all. I know for me personally, I like to have the TV on, the windows closed if it's cold. I like to be kind of warm when I sleep. So just kind of think about what type of environment are you in when you sleep the best, and just create that for yourself. Also, avoid screens or turn down brightness about 30 minutes before bedtime. And that's because the blue light feature actually will affect your sleep quality. So I know on iPhones, for example, there's a night shift feature where you can turn off the blue light between, I think mine is like 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. or something like that. So you're able to do that if you'd like to. But it is a feature that is possible on iPhones. And if you can't fall asleep, get up for a little bit and do a quiet activity. So maybe it's just walking around the house a little bit just to kind of wind the mind down and get back to sleep. Maybe it's reading for a little bit. Anything that you think will work for you to just kind of wind the mind down is what I like to say. Avoid the use of nicotine, alcohol, and drugs. That's because that will also affect your sleep quality. So just trying to avoid the use of that will definitely help, as well as getting regular exercise or physical activity. Because, you know, when we're moving around, we're being physically active, we're exerting that energy. So we're able to sleep better at nighttime. And when we sleep better, we can definitely perform better. All right, so we got eat, sleep, now we're at move, moving more, getting physically active. It is recommended to get 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week. This may or may not seem attainable for some of you, but sometimes it's as simple as just making little adjustments in your schedule. So maybe it's walking to class instead of taking the bus or driving. Maybe it's walking to go pick up some food instead of driving. Maybe it's walking to the lagoon to take a nice little walk in between class, whatever that looks like for you. So I know for me, I like to walk every time I'm done with work. I'll walk for about 15 minutes one way to campus and then 15 minutes back. So boom, that's my 30 minutes of exercise for the day, and I'll do that Monday through Friday. So just think about your schedule and how you could incorporate that 30 minutes of exercise in the day. Just to kind of spark that, here are some activities that you could potentially engage in. So playing a sport, maybe that means playing some sports with your friends, or joining a sport club or intramurals. Maybe that's just going for a walk, a jog, or a run. Plenty of beautiful places around campus to go explore. Maybe it's hiking. We do have a adventure center on campus as a part of the rec, and they have so many fun events that you can engage in, socially distanced as well, and they always have fun, different hiking or yoga outside, just little fun things that you can do to promote that environmental wellness. Maybe it's taking the stairs instead of, doing an elevator when you're out, as well as yoga, Zumba, and other fitness classes, as I know those are free to students this semester through the Rec Center. And just some tips. So find your motivation or goal. In the end, you're going to be doing this for yourself, not for anyone else. So make sure to go at your own pace. You know, if you're someone who's not a runner, then you're probably not going to go outside and run a 5K. that's completely okay because I don't do that either. I know that for me, I'd rather just take a nice little walk, outside in nature. So really just figure out what works for you and find what motivates you. I know I like to play certain songs before I get ready to exercise or just be physically active because it gets me really pumped and ready to go. And lastly, just connect with the recreation center. They have so many fun, different things to do that really relate to anyone's interests. So, like I said, maybe it's the adventure center, hiking, yoga outside. That's something you're interested in. Maybe you just like to be in the comfort of your own home doing some virtual fitness classes as well. They've got a lot of different options, so definitely check them out on the NIU website. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who will discuss creating an efficient workspace.
Hi everyone. So I'd like to start off with this creating an efficient workspace portion with just the mention that the research has actually shown that if you are doing schoolwork or work in your bed or safe space where you try to sleep, then it's actually more stressful when you actually try and go to sleep. So the recommendation is to not do your work and so your homework, or if you're working from home like I am, try not to work in inside of your bed, because later, as soon as you try to fall asleep, it's going to make it more difficult. So moving on, the first tip on creating an efficient workspace is to create an ideal workspace. So determine when, where, and how you work best. For myself, I work best in a small office that I have at home. It has a desk and a comfortable chair, and the door it can close. So the lighting is pretty good, and I also have my privacy. But for some, it might be on the kitchen table or in the living room, or even in a standing desk if you have one of those. So the recommendation is that you clean off your workspace and you try to have your workspace resemble your mind, because an organized space can reduce stress. So if your workspace is messy, you're probably going to feel disorganized or also messy on the inside. Try to make your workspace your own. So for me personally, I like to have my water bottle to the side, the door closed with privacy, and I have a little lamp here. And I also have access to natural lighting. And for me, it just provides me with the vitamin D, and then I can open and close it as I wish. And again, this it can look different for everyone. And so I recommend just trying to figure out what is going to work best for you in these types of situations, especially now with COVID-19 and with school being online primarily and potentially to your workspace. So the next one is to manage tech stress. And by this, we mean your cell phone or your computer or your Fitbit, even if you have one of those. So try to schedule screen time. So set time aside to check your email, respond to text messages, and to go on social media. I know for myself, I love going on TikTok, and when I try to just briefly scroll through it, I find myself there for actually hours. And so I think it's important to set time aside to look at your phone and then put it away. So if you have an alarm on your phone, it might be beneficial to do that. And so scroll through TikTok for maybe 10 minutes instead of 1 hour. Next is to power your devices down. So turn off your notifications while driving, while you're in class, and while you're with friends and family. This can cause you to kind of unplug and decompress and live in the present moment. And last is to unfriend the annoying and offensive. So focus on those who really matter and are a positive influence. Next, I'm going to be talking about time management. So time management seems pretty unrealistic in college just because everyone is juggling jobs, school, having a social life, taking care of yourself, and more. So time management is extremely important for a college student because you're not just a student. and we try to recognize that. So schedule uninterrupted work time. And by this, you can go ahead and put it in your calendar or your physical planner that maybe twice a week at the same time you're going to study for a math test or start a paper, etc. Because then it's in your calendar and you're more likely to follow it. The next is to break down overwhelming tasks. So try to separate big projects into smaller tasks. I just can remember me being in my psychology class and having all these big papers because college is a lot of papers. And at first, I'd wait until the last minute and I'd be so stressed and I'd procrastinate and I'd feel extremely overwhelmed. And so instead, I decided to start from my paper just a little bit early because then I could work on it in parts for shorter periods of time. And the next one is to set personal goals, create specific deadlines, and so recognize what has to be done first according to deadlines, and be realistic. And try to do only one thing at a time. We love to think as college students that we are great at multitasking. But what we're actually saying is that we're good at doing multiple tasks at one time at 25% instead of one task at 100%. And lastly, prioritize your tasks. So categorize things you must do, things that can wait, and things that would be nice to complete if you have extra time. The next one is to remember to treat yourself. And we love to add this in here because it's important to take care of yourself and reward yourself for your hard work. College is extremely stressful, and it's important to recognize that and take care of ourselves. Treat yourself where it is deserved and even when it's not deserved, because it's important to be nice to yourself here in college. And determine what recharges you. So when you think of a stressful day, what do you try to do to decompress? Or what makes you feel better? That answer might be taking a bath, going to the gym, spending time with friends. And last, schedule breaks. It's easy to kind of get lost in a project, except it's important to take breaks, take care of yourself, maybe step outside, especially with quarantine rules, especially back in March. We're all inside and we're plugged in, we're paying attention to the news or maybe watching our favorite Netflix shows. It's important to unplug and take a break because then you can come back and feel even better. So the next one I'm going to be talking about is to build supportive networks. And by this, we mean to connect with your supports. Social supports buffer the effects of stress. And remember, these types of supports are an investment of time and energy. So it's important to set some time aside and reach out. So consider this. Who are your biggest supporters in your life? How often do you connect with them? What is the best way you connect with your supports? So some example of these are your friends and family, team members, counseling services, clergy and other church members, and your community advisors. And this may seem kind of impossible due to coronavirus, but there are other ways to connect with your types of supports. And even if it's not people, there are other things you can do that may feel supportive. So now I'm going to be discussing those types of other supports. You can try and get creative. So draw, paint, craft, or write a poem even, sing or dance it out, or listen to or create music. So just break out that energy and express yourself. And the next one is self-care. So this kind of brings it back to taking care of yourself and what makes you feel better. So self-care, it might be going for a daily walk, petting your dog if you have one at home, or your cat, who knows, and even just yoga, mindfulness, or if that is binging on Netflix, that can be self care too. And that's okay every once in a while. The next is to make time for hobbies. Watch your favorite show or movie, plan a trip post coronavirus, play video games or board games, read books, comics, or other things on the internet. So I'm curious, or what are some other types of supports that you all have in your life? So Jackbox games with families online. I know that I went through a period of time FaceTiming with my friends, a supportive spouse I see. And so it's great to have that type of support both in person and virtually. So moving on to the next slide is to regulate your emotional response. And so this can be your response to stress or anger and etc. And so the first part in this is to practice some self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same kindness you show others. So for example, if you find yourself kind of beating yourself up about a negative test score or maybe a grade on a paper, and you find yourself saying something along the lines of, wow, I'm so stupid. Think about if you would say that to your friend. Would you call your friend stupid? Probably not. And instead, replace that thought with what you would say to your friend. So that might be, hey, it's one grade. You tried your best. You can go ahead and try better next time. And the next one is to practice self acceptance. So be understanding and kind to yourself. Tolerate and learn from your mistakes. And take yourself less seriously. College is a time to discover yourself, and you're growing and you're going through a lot. It's stressful, and we've said that so many times. But be nice to yourself and accept yourself for what you are and how you're doing. And if you're looking at yourself and you're thinking, I'm really not doing that well, there are things you can do to try to make yourself feel better. The next thing I'm going to be talking about is anger awareness. So anger awareness, stress and anxiety can come out in anger response. It's one of the first emotions that come out when you're stressed, anxious, or upset. So here are some steps to kind of be aware of it. So the first one is to recognize your anger response. So what triggers this response? What do you feel when you get angry? Emotionally or physically, because we've talked about the physical symptoms of stress as well. The second one is to explore ways to interrupt your anger. Count to 10, kind of distract yourself, get a drink of water, or take some deep breaths. The third is to find the words to de-escalate. Avoid you always or you never during an argument, and instead turn that dialogue kind of inward. I feel when you. And lastly, talk it out. If you find that this anger is really starting to affect you and your relationships and your well-being, talk to those who you trust. And if you find that maybe you're not comfortable talking to those in your life about it, that's okay. It's actually extremely normal to not want to talk about the vulnerable, scary stuff on the inside. And for that, we recommend to try to seek more support from a counselor if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by this anger. And next, warrior to warrior. So the first step to kind of fight with this anxiety is to reframe your thoughts. Focus on what is going right rather than what is going wrong. And learn to accept what you can't change and what you can control. The next is to tackle the negative self-talk. Aware of it, stop it, and then replace it with positive thoughts and strengths. You can stop yourself having these thoughts by physically saying stop out loud or under your breath or in your mind. And lastly, create a 20-minute worry period to journal or talk it out. And this is kind of in the moment when you may be feeling your most anxious and you just have to put all your thoughts on paper. And lastly, seek more support from a counselor if you're feeling too overwhelmed by your worries. Next, we're going to be talking about learn to say no. I know that I struggle with this. It's difficult to say no to the people in your life because you're one person and you have a lot of responsibilities and things to do. Well, here to try to fight that. First, be sympathetic but firm. If they try and persist, stand your ground. The next one is to not give in to guilt. You don't owe anyone your time. The next one is to avoid spontaneous yes responses. So, in response of a request, you may say, I'll have to get back to you on that, because then you can think about it and say yes or no later. And lastly, take care of yourself and schedule time for yourself. If you're feeling burnt out with everything going on in your life and you just need to chill, unplug, and decompress, make time for that, because it's hard to pour from an empty glass. Next, we're going to be talking about some relaxation techniques that we think may be beneficial. So the first one is mindfulness. And mindfulness is the ability to be fully present in the moment. So what it looks like is that you are aware of your thoughts and feelings in the present moment. You're accepting of things you cannot change and what you are not in control of. And lastly, you're going to be experiencing non-judgmental thoughts. So the thought it may pop up in your brain of, oh, this is so stupid, or oh, I have to do this, I'm wasting my time. Try to redirect those thoughts and just be right here in the moment in what you're doing. So it might sound kind of complicated as I'm describing it. So I'm going to provide you with an example. So if you're a coffee drinker like me, then imagine drinking coffee in the morning. If you're not a coffee person, go ahead and imagine it's whatever you choose to drink in the morning. So for me, I have a coffee mug in my hand. What do you smell? What is the temperature like of my drink? What does it taste like? What does it feel like in my hand? And how does it feel as I drink my coffee? So this uses all of your senses to kind of ground yourself and be present right here in the moment. And this can be done by really doing anything. So taking a shower, washing the dishes, brushing your hair. So I definitely recommend practicing that. And then the next one I'm going to be talking about is meditation. So meditation is the practice of cultivating a still or quiet mind. So what this may look like is the picture on the screen, or it can also be just you sitting in your chair with your feet flat on the ground, sitting straight up, and your hands on your legs. So the steps to meditate are: find a quiet place and sit comfortably and rest your hands on your knees. Try to be relaxed and close your eyes. And the next step is to quiet your mind. Use a mantra to repeat silently. And this may be just the Om sound that you hear in the cliche movies or when you are hearing a meditation, or it can just be really anything. Notice your thoughts and release them. Count and focus on your breaths. Focus on the colors you see when your eyes are closed. And if you think it might be beneficial, you can go ahead and follow a guided meditation. They have those on YouTube and also in the apps that I'll be talking about on this slide. So this slide has 3 apps that we find to be helpful to practice mindfulness and meditation. So the first is to stop, breathe, and think. The next one is Calm. The last one is Headspace. All of these have guided meditations to help with symptoms of stress, anxiety, sleep difficulties, etc. Highly recommended. I believe the Stop, Breathe, and Think app is free, but the Calm and Headspace app may have a small fee, if not a student trial. And lastly, we like to go ahead and add this. If they can do it, you can too. All of these people have graduated from our university and they have gone through the process of exploring college, going through the emotions. And so I like to provide this kind of sense of hope that it is possible and you're so close. Even if you just started, the first step is starting and you did it. So check that off the list. Moving on to some resources we like to share. So there is Student Wellness, which is us. We have a bunch of mission wellness articles that are in relation to a bunch of wellness topics. So sleeping, eating, moving more. And we also do presentations similar to this one. And you are able to ask us for more information at the email that is listed. And then the last ones are counseling and consultation services, health services, recreation and wellness, the Disability Resource Center, the Writing Center, and they can help you write your papers and edit them and provide feedback, and career services if you find that you're stressed about your career or you're maybe thinking about doing a switch. I'd like to mention as a student, you do have access to free counseling services at the Community Counseling Training Center in Graham Hall. I believe right now they're doing it over telehealth, and so that is on the computer, and that is free to you. And you also have access to the counseling and consultation services. So as we are ending our webinar this week, I just want to go ahead and briefly talk about the rest of our webinars that are happening this fall semester. So as you can see, we're going to be talking about a list of different topics. Next week is coping with disappointment. The week after is connecting with others, so on and so forth. And they are going to be on Mondays at 4 p.m. The only week where we are not doing it is the week of October 26th, so the week of Halloween, because we will be putting on Welloween instead. And Welloween is a 4-day virtual event of wellness activities and presentations. So we will post more information on that. And lastly, here is our survey that's on the screen, and we will go ahead and post the link in the chat for you. It'd be greatly appreciated if you could fill that out and let us know how we're doing, how we can improve, and if you learned anything. Thank you so much.